The Dallas Stars are looking to close out their first round series against the Minnesota Wild tonight. And on today's episode, we'll be getting you prepared for everything you need to know going into tonight's game. We'll talk about Miro Heiskanen and Roope Hintz and the heaters they've been on and how the Stars can leave St. Paul with the series clinched. All of this and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, coming to you on this Friday, April 28th. And whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for stopping by and making Locked On Stars your first listen every single day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. We're always free and available no matter where or how you choose to consume the show. And thank you guys for tuning in all of this week. I hope you guys enjoyed yesterday's episode with Steven Meserve, who covers the Texas Stars of the AHL. Super fun conversation. If you haven't checked that episode out, I encourage you to do so, as the Texas Stars also begin their hunt for the Calder Cup in the AHL. They begin their search or their journey to playoff glory, hopefully at the American Hockey League level. Tons of fun players down there. But also the Dallas Stars back in action after a couple of days off. They get that 2-day break, Wednesday and Thursday off. And now they're back tonight in St. Paul for Game 6 against the Minnesota Wild, looking to clinch the series. And there's a few different players that I want to highlight going into this game. And one of those is Miro Heiskanen, who I feel like I have not talked about enough through the first 5 games of this series. A lot has been said about Jake Ottinger in this series, especially after games 3 and 4. And while Jake certainly does deserve credit, and I feel like he has been given his proper amount of credit so far, the defense in front of him has also been considerably better, especially these past couple of games. That hasn't been the case across the board throughout the entirety of this series. But over games 4 and 5, I think the defense around the crease was definitely a little bit tighter, and that begins and ends with the play of Miro Heiskanen. Heiskanen has been the best all-around defenseman in the Stanley Cup playoffs up to this point, the way I see it. He leads the NHL and his team in total time on ice with 145 minutes and 49 seconds. On the Stars, the second-place player, Ryan Suter, has only skated 113 minutes and 58 seconds. To put that into perspective of how much time Miro Heiskanen has been out there on the ice, and it has been a lot of minutes for number 4, which is to be expected for a still relatively young NHL defenseman who is in the prime of his body, of his athletic career. You expect that sort of usage rate out of him, especially given how Pete DeBoer and the coaching staff utilized Miro throughout the season. He also has 6 points right now, which at the time of recording is tied for third amongst NHL defensemen. 5 of those 6 points have come on the power play. He's been a driving force for the Stars offensively, especially on the man advantage. And it's been really fun to see how he continues to carry that title of premier Dallas Stars defenseman ever since the departure of John Klingberg, who is now on this Minnesota team, who's not having a bad series in his own right. But you cannot deny the effect that Miro Heiskanen has had on this team and on this series, even though he isn't drawing all the headlines or garnering the most attention. This series would not be the same if he were not participating. And he is a huge reason for the Stars' success up to this point offensively, but of course also defensively too. He's been carrying his weight. And overall, the Stars' defense has been very good at silencing some of Minnesota's biggest offensive threats, especially Kirill Kaprizov, the guy who won the Calder Trophy a couple seasons ago over Jason Robertson, a 40-goal scorer, 75 total points this season, only 1 goal, 1 point through 5 games in this series. And we know that Kaprizov is likely not 100% healthy. He did suffer that lower body injury at the end of the regular season and missed a considerable amount of time before coming back into the lineup. But even with that, I mean, Kirill Kaprizov, he's one of those players that even when he's banged up and even when he's injured, you would expect to get a little bit more production from him. And it seemed like that's what we were going to get, right? I mean, he scored the first goal of the series on the power play in game 1. But ever since then, Kirill Kaprizov has been silent. And you barely notice that 97 is out there on the ice. But it's also players like Matt Boldy, who had 31 goals, 63 points during the regular season. He's been held to only 3 assists so far in this series. And a ton of that has to do with the play of Miro Heiskanen and the rest of the defensive core. Guys like Thomas Harley, Esa Lindell, Yanni Hakanpää, all of those guys are taking after Miro Heiskanen, but it really just begins and ends there. And I remember during game 5, I believe it was on the Bally broadcast, because I'm soaking up all of these Stars biased broadcasts while I can with Bally Sports. They were showing throughout the broadcast during game 5 snippets of Miro Heiskanen just making these subtly great defensive plays, positioning himself in passing lanes, using his stick to break up a potential breakaway opportunity. I mean, it's just little things here and there that can often go overlooked in the grand scheme of a game, but it's also little plays that make a major difference. It's a game of inches. It's a game of milliseconds at times, and Miro Heiskanen makes everything look incredibly easy on the defensive end of the ice. And he has been a huge reason why the Stars find themselves in this position, because the Wild have been able to get themselves going offensively, but especially over the past 2 games, that hasn't really been the case. And you have to give a ton of credit to Miro, who it feels like you can't put a price tag on what he brings to this team and what he provides in the postseason. I guess to some extent you can with his $8.45 million cap hit, but I feel like he's worth so much more than that, just with what he's able to do for this team, the leader that he is both on and off the ice, an incredibly hard worker, keeps his feet moving, defends the best players on the ice, but also is a major driving force for the offense at the 5-on-5 level and on the power play. Miro Heiskanen, again, I'll say it again. I said it at the start of the segment, I'll say it again. The best defenseman in the NHL postseason at this moment. And you cannot convince me otherwise with the way that he's played through the first 5 games of this series. And I expect him to have a huge impact on how things go tonight in Game 6. From one Stars Finnish player to another, we're going to talk about Roope Hintz and the stupendous series he has had up to this point. All of that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts or accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen every single day and tuning in throughout the entirety of this playoff run. Appreciate you everydayers out there making Locked On Stars part of your daily routine. We will likely have some sort of episode or some piece of content out tomorrow or late Friday night recapping what happens in Game 6 to make sure that we are covering everything that happens in this series. Speaking of everything happening in this series, it's hard to talk about this first round battle between the Stars and the Wild without talking about Roope Hintz, not to be outdone by his fellow countryman, Miro Heiskanen. Roope Hintz is also having a special postseason through only 5 games, with hopefully many more still to come. He has 4 goals, 7 assists, and 11 points in total, which is the most points in a single playoff series by a Dallas Stars player. And you just look at the improvement from Roope Hintz over the years. He had 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points in 25 games played in the bubble. So he nearly has as many points through 6 games or 5 games, really, I guess, and then 6 games tonight. He has nearly as many points as, in one series as he did through 4 back in the Edmonton bubble back in 2020 when the Stars made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. And we've just continued to see that continued progression from Roope Hintz during his time in the NHL. At the time of recording this, he leads the National Hockey League in scoring in the Stanley Cup playoffs with those 11 points. He's elevated his game to the next level, even with different line mates in different positions. Tyler Seguin, of course, has been filling in for Joe Pavelski, which it's kind of a full circle moment because at one point in the regular season, we saw Tyler Seguin fill in for Roope Hintz, but now both of those guys are playing together alongside Jason Robertson, and that trio has been nothing short of fantastic through the first 5 games of this series, and I expect that to be the case tonight, although we might be seeing the return of Joe Pavelski sooner rather than later. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, but first we got to keep talking about Roope Hintz, who, again, is just continuing to impress as he grows and develops his game. He's now in his mid-20s. He's not a kid anymore. I mean, he certainly plays like one. He skates with the youthfulness and the speed of a youngster. And he's not old either. He's kind of in that healthy middle ground, the prime of his career. I feel like he's truly entered into that stage with the way that he moves, the way he sees the ice, the way he shoots, the way he defends. It's been really nice to see those signs of improvement since joining the team. And it's just crazy to think about because you look back to the moment that he joined this organization. He really wasn't even the biggest name out of his respective draft class. It was Denis Gurianov, who was taken in the first round of that 2015 NHL draft. And Gurianov and Hintz, the only 2 players from that draft class who have played in the NHL for the Dallas Stars. And if looking back, you would have expected Gurianov to make a little bit more of an impact, and maybe even earlier on in their careers, you would have expected Denis Gurianov to be doing what we're seeing Roope Hintz do right now. And it just hasn't been the case. Denis Gurianov no longer a member of the organization. He's in Montreal, and Roope Hintz is one of the faces of the franchise, up there with Jake Ottinger, Miro Heiskanen, and Jason Robertson, which is truly special to see. Not that a second-round pick is a guy that no one's ever heard of or a guy that people didn't expect to succeed. But if you're getting picked in the second round, you're likely not the talk of the town amongst the NHL prospect crew or people who expect, you're not in the same conversation as this year as guys like Connor Bedard. But Roope Hintz has come in and had an incredible impact on this team, on this franchise, and it's showing, it's paying dividends here in this first round series against Minnesota. His fingerprints have been all over every single game, making an impact in every facet of the game, on special teams, on 5-on-5. Just an incredible leader to have out there on the ice, a level-headed player who plays with fire, plays with emotion, but doesn't get emotional while he's out there on the ice, doesn't let the emotions overtake him, if you will, but yet he still plays that clean, smooth game that we've all associated with Roope Hintz ever since he joined the Dallas Stars. I wanted to say a couple seasons ago, but it's really been a handful of seasons ago. Roope is showing that hard work pays off, and he's been rewarded for his play recently with his recent contract extension. He and Miro Heiskanen, 2 members of the Stars Finnish Mafia, getting paid a healthy amount of cash for their services. But also it feels like we're getting to a point where Miro and Roope are both a little bit underpaid, just like Jason Robertson, with how good they've been. I, of course, made my comment on Twitter the other night. Tyler Seguin coming for the Conn Smythe. He has been playing great, but I should have said Roope Hintz then, and I have since corrected myself. This is the second time now on the podcast that I've corrected myself. And how special would that be to see Roope Hintz continue to play at this pace? Much easier said than done. But again, this is a guy who knows what it takes to win. He's not a kid anymore, and he's showing the NHL world that he is truly a superstar like his teammates Jake Ottinger and Jason Robertson. We're going to take a minute now and talk about one of the other members of the Dallas Stars top line, one of the members that we haven't seen play since Game 1 of this series. Is Joe Pavelski going to be coming back? Will we see him play in Game 6? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. It feels like forever ago that the playoffs were starting. Game 1 in Dallas, energy was high. The AAC was absolutely electric. And then halfway through the first period, we see Matt Dumba take a shot at Joe Pavelski, a play that lived in controversy, still to some extent is living in controversy, whether it was a dirty hit, a clean hit, whether or not, Dumba left his feet, was aiming for the head, so on and so forth. But what we did know was Joe Pavelski was injured and that he was not going to be playing for the next handful of games. And that's exactly what happened. And he was in concussion protocol, but the reports ever since then have been progressively getting better, that he had been skating, that he had been feeling more like himself, that he was getting back to fully being the Joe Pavelski that we all know and love out there on the ice. It was really just a matter of when we could see him. And if it was going to be in this series, it probably wouldn't be until a game 6 or 7. But now game 6 has arrived, and the Dallas Stars have loaned forward Riley Tufte back to the Texas Stars, which means we are getting close to the return of Joe Pavelski, because Riley Tufte was called up once Pavs went down. So now you don't need to have this extra forward on the team to be a healthy scratch alongside guys like Freddie Olofsson. You can send him back to the American Hockey League to play with his teammates in Cedar Park. So I really do think that that is telling that we are very, very close to seeing the return of number 16 on the ice for this Dallas team, which is absolutely incredible and an absolute game changer for the Stars heading into what could potentially be the series finale. Pavelski will be traveling with the team to Minnesota and will be a game time decision, according to Pete DeBoer and everything he had to say during his press conference on Wednesday afternoon. It drastically changes things for the Stars, as they will now have their best line reunited fully with Roope Hintz on the heater that we just discussed in the last segment. And then, of course, Jason Robertson, I think, will benefit playing alongside Pavelski as well. Pavelski is a historically great playoff performer with 126 points in 169 games. He had actually picked up a single point before the injury in game 1, the hit from Matt Dumba. He got picked up an assist at one point in that first period before going down. Pavelski, obviously a very proven performer in the postseason, and Pete DeBoer knows this as well, having coached him to a Stanley Cup Finals appearance back in 2016. So I'm very excited at the idea of potentially getting to see Pavs back in the lineup with the Stars. But we will also get to see, likely, Tyler Seguin get moved to a different spot in the lineup, which has been a hot topic of discussion. And I don't really want to say a concern, but just something that people have questions with. How is Tyler Seguin going to perform without two of the league's best forwards by his side? No offense to Max Domi or Mason Marchment, but both of those guys are not Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson. It's apples and oranges in comparison there. But can Seguin find a way to continue to elevate his game while also elevating the game of the guys around him? Can he continue to get the most out of himself, but also get Mason Marchment to maybe start a little bit of a point streak here in the postseason? We saw him get his first goal of the playoffs back in game 5. And can he help get Max Domi involved? We've seen that trio play together in brief stints, but it feels like every time they get together, something interrupts it. Seguin has to go play on the top line in place of Hintz, or then Mason Marchment gets injured, so on and so forth. We've seen the flashes, we've seen the potential, but we haven't seen a ton of longevity from that trio. So Pavelski coming back is a very good thing, but it does start a little bit of a domino effect here for the Dallas Stars. And I don't want to see Tyler Seguin fall off the map. I want him to continue to play at a high level. And so it is my hope that he will be able to do that. And hopefully Mason Marchment and Domi both now have a little bit of confidence after their involvement in game 5. I believe Domi picked up an assist on that Ty Dellandrea empty net goal. Would really love to see that line become a little more solidified, so that way you have 3 very solid scoring lines and then a heavy checking fourth line that can make life miserable for the Minnesota Wild. And the Stars can truly get back to being themselves a team that can roll 4 lines night in and night out. But Joe Pavelski seems like he's coming back very soon. It's promising that he traveled with the team to Minnesota, and I think it's promising that Pete DeBoer says he's a game time decision, but he said that Joe is looking and sounding a lot more like himself. And all of that news sounds like good news to me. And I'm very excited to see when he returns to the ice. And I'm hoping it's tonight for game 6, because we know the Stars could definitely need him to help close this game out. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you so much again for tuning in and making us your first listen every single day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform of choice. We're always free and available no matter where or how you choose to listen. You can also find and follow us on social media at Locked On Stars on Instagram and Twitter, as well as my personal Twitter account at Dane_Lewis. Thank you guys again for tuning in. We will have something out either later tonight or early tomorrow morning, recapping everything that goes down in Game 6. And fingers crossed that we're talking about the Stars advancing to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I hope you guys have a fantastic Friday. Enjoy your day. Enjoy the game tonight. And we'll see you right back here tonight or tomorrow.